Hey guys, Brandon with Flyin Miata, and today we're going to talk about hubs, when to replace them, how you know you need to replace them, and what your options are. Now we have information for all four generations, and a bunch of that information comes straight from Mazda Motorsports. So definitely stay tuned. There's some good stuff in here. As always, like and subscribe if you want to see more of this, and if you want to make sure that you are up to date on all of the fancy Miata things going on. Now, hubs. First, if you have questions, drop them in the comments, and we will get to them kind of at the end, but we'll go through as much as we can here. So, to start off with, why would you need to replace your hubs? The first reason is because they're failing. And how do you know if they're failing? If there's a rumbling noise when you are driving, particularly if it's worse on acceleration or on turning, if your steering is suddenly loose, like it's not quite as what you do here doesn't equate to what the car does quite as well as it used to. If there's a vibration in the steering wheel, and then also if you can grab the wheel and rock it back and forth, particularly at the top and bottom, that is another good indication of a hub failure. These could all be indications of other things, so they're not necessarily a guarantee, but those are things to pay attention to. Also, as our own Keith Tanner has demonstrated for us in the past, there is a video of this on YouTube somewhere. If your wheel has left your car and departed because parts have broken off, that's a good indication that you have a problem with your hub that you really should have looked into before, but now you really need to look into it. So that is the most grotesque one. But the other thing is simply being proactive, whether that's maintenance on a race car or whether that's, I'm going to start doing more and more track days. I'm driving harder. I'm going to upgrade the rubber on my car. So now the load is going to be a lot more. So now maybe my OE hubs aren't going to be up to the task. So these are all the reasons that you would need to replace your hubs. As far as upgrading your hubs, the really short version is the harder you drive the car, the more likely it is you need an upgrade, and if available, the higher level of upgrade you need. So we'll kind of go through those real quick here, and then we'll on my notes to make sure that I don't miss anything. So for stock and street use, really an OE hub is probably going to be fine. When it fails, you can probably replace it with an OE hub, which this is actually not, but it does look identical. Be careful about aftermarket alternatives. Some of them are not designed particularly intelligently. Some of them are machined right in this corner right here. You need a big radius there. The bigger the better. That's one of the big benefits to these hubs, which we'll get to in a minute. Because that's going to eliminate or dramatically decrease that stress riser there, so it decreases the likelihood of a structural failure of your hub where the flange will actually snap off. Also, you can't rely on the rotor to take the place of a wheel. It's almost like they weren't designed for that purpose. So yeah, good quality OE replacement for just a street car. If it's going to be a track car, maybe autocross, but really more track, sticky tires, that kind of thing, then you want to start, and this is for NAs and NBs specifically, then you want to start looking at upgrades. Your first upgrade is going to be a blueprinted hub. So this is going to be basically an OE hub, but with a new bearing in it that has been blueprinted. So that means it's got very high quality grease. The grease is really important in there, and it's also been kind of disassembled. All the balls have been inspected, so if there's any kind of imperfections, anything like that, they've all been replaced, or they will be replaced and matched with the same size, all that fun stuff. So blueprinted hubs are great because they're going to give you a big head start on hub failure. They are not going to do anything for you in terms of a structural failure unless you're going from a $10 cheapie, not designed intelligently hub to an actual OE hub, in which case it is a giant upgrade. So for a lot of people, for a lot of, kind of fun track day cars, you have R compound tires that are pretty sticky, but they're not bonkers. You're not setting FTD. you're not wildly aggressive on the curbs, that kind of thing, then a blueprinted hub will be a good option for you. If you are at the pointy end and you are very, very fast, you have giant race compound, not DOT tires, very, very sticky. You're very aggressive. You are setting fastest time of day and that kind of thing. Then you're going to need something quite a bit more durable. And again, NA and NB is what we're talking about here. So these are the Mazda Motorsports hubs that we carry. They are beastly. So these are 4150 chromoly, I think. Yes, 4150 chromoly. Very, very thick flange to keep that failure from happening. I mean, it's almost kind of comical, the difference there. And there's also a giant radius to get rid of that stress riser that much more. They have MSI studs, so those are the best studs that you can have. One of the biggest things is that they use tapered roller bearings as opposed to ball bearings. So if you can imagine the contact area on an individual bearing. So right here, it's going to be a line through the length of that bearing. With these guys, and I searched long and hard. Turns out that, you know, when bearings are bad, we throw them away, so we don't have any bearings to show you. But take my word for it, they're balls. So it's more of a point of contact as opposed to a line of contact. Point being, there's much less surface area with a ball bearing than there is with a roller bearing. So this is going to be a much burlier, longer lasting bearing, which isn't really that important for a street car that's not putting crazy loads through it. It is that important for a full bore race car with aero and giant tires and being driven very aggressively and that kind of thing. Now, I'm going to back up a minute here to the stock hubs. A couple of fun facts that I learned in my conversation with Mazda Motorsports. This flange right here from Mazda, who knows why, is actually 40,000ths of an inch thinner on an ABS hub than on a non-ABS hub. So if we're really going to split hairs, you want to get a non-ABS hub for an ABS car and then press your ring onto this surface that is machined for ABS on at least all of the Mazda hubs. Probably all the aftermarkets as well, because they just duplicated kind of what Mazda did. So that is kind of a hot tip right there. So, you know, kind of point being, our blueprinted hubs, we only sell non-ABS versions, meaning that they don't come with the reluctor ring here, but you can press your ring onto this car. So these guys will work with ABS if you're willing to go through that. These obviously have nowhere for that ring to go onto and are comically larger. So no ABS for these guys. So NC. The NC, many of you already know this, was engineered together basically with the RX8. So the RX8 being a bigger, heavier car, there are a number of things on the RX8 that will swap over to the NC. So we kind of have an advantage there because there are OE parts that are built for a heavier car, bigger car. So when we push our cars a lot harder, again, big giant tires, particularly compound of those tires, that is going to make a difference. So RX8 Hub, factory Mazda hub, high quality, easy peasy, bolts in. Easy as long as your car has not fused parts together because it's rusty and gross, but you know, that's your deal. And these work really, really well. They're not quite as beefy as these guys. They are way beefier than these guys, and they do work really, really well for basically all cars out there. Now, if it's a full bore race car, you need to do a lot more maintenance on that than you do a street car. So these will be consumables, but the consumption rate is going to be dramatically lower than that of a stock hub. Now, we sell these guys as well. Bear in mind that a RX8 hub is not necessarily the RX8 hub that you need for your NC. I'll spare you all the boring details. The really short version is make sure you get the right one. The easiest way to do that is buy it from us. We've got the right one on the shelf ready to go. Now, rear hubs, NCs can be, and actually NAs and NBs can have these kinds of failures. On the NAs and the NBs, for an upgraded rear hub, currently you're going to be looking at like V8 Roadsters, Miata Hubs, those kinds of guys. For most kind of normal track day cars, that's not a thing that's typically necessary. For the big boy cars, V8s, giant tires, lots of aero, super aggressive driving, very fast lap times, that kind of thing, yeah, this is the thing you're going to want to look for. So again, NAs and NBs, V8 Roadsters and Miata Hubs are both really good options. For the NC, Mazda Motorsports actually has a great option there that's the same kind of concept. Basically, it's kind of this, but with a bearing pressed into it with splines for the axle, all that kind of stuff. Now, didn't I say that because the RX8 and the NC were engineered from the ground up together, more or less, a lot of RX8 parts swap over to the NC? Yes, I did. Can't you do that to the rear? Yes, you can. Does that have an asterisk attached to it? Yes, a very large one. So for the purposes of this video, the really short version, is it possible? Yes. Is it way more complicated and far more specific than you think and generally a headache to do? Yes. Buy the Mazda Motorsports rear hubs. They fit with all of your stock stuff. It's new bearing, so it won't work with the stock bearing, and that new hub flange, and then you're done. No axles, no uprights, no mixing and matching a bunch of really weird parts. You're good to go. Yeah, and again, that rear flange, kind of same deal. Real thick here, big old radius here, good material, all that fun stuff. Excuse me. So for the ND, currently, your options are what comes on your car. So there are no upgrade options that we're aware of for the ND, for the front or the rear. Generally speaking, the NDs do pretty well for hub durability. The Cup MX or the Global Cup guys are a special breed, we'll say, and are super abusive to their cars because they're trying to win races and they are banging fenders and all that fun stuff. So they definitely, as you do with a race car, treat them as maintenance items, and they do need to be replaced regularly. For the rest of us mortals, track day stuff, you're probably fine. It is always a good idea to check things, and if there's any question, just go ahead and replace them. But generally speaking, with normal tires and normal driving, even if it's on track, that kind of thing, you're probably going to be fine with the ND, with the stock stuff. But pay attention because there are no guarantees and things wear out. So one thing to pay attention to is that if you're pressing in studs, don't cause a problem where there wasn't one to start off with. That means you want to be very careful about getting the stud perfectly square. Really carefully support the backside of the flange here and then press the stud in carefully, keeping a close eye on it. Don't pull it in with an impact. Don't wail on it with a hammer. Anything like that can cause a problem with your hub, and specifically with your hub flange, which causes dramatic failures where one did not exist to start off with. So that is a thing to pay attention to when you're installing extended or different higher strength studs. Okay, so questions. We got a handful of questions ahead of time. I will go through those right now, and then we'll see if we have any live questions. After that, if you haven't put your questions in yet, do it now. If something I say prompts a question, awesome. Drop them in the comments and we'll get to them. If we don't get to them live, we'll get to them after the fact. Okay, are there hubs available for all generations? Everything but the ND. Yes. Sorry, ND people, but it is a newer car. Everything else has been around for a long time. If there is a big need, then that will happen. But at this point, they're mostly okay, I guess. Do all generations have the same issues and problems with OEM hubs? Kind of yes and kind of no. The NAs and NBs are going to be the worst. They're the most likely to fail with the lowest load. Again, just for a generic street car, now you're probably fine. But it takes less load to kill an NA hub than it does an NC hub, that type of thing. So hopefully that answers that question. What about hub swaps? Will ND hubs work on an NA? No. Will RX8 hubs work on an NC? Yes, as long as you use the proper RX8 hub, because not all RX8 hubs will work. 5-lug conversions, that's a different topic. We're not going to get into that one today, etc. So generally speaking, hub swaps can be a little bit more complicated. The only kind of straightforward one is the RX8, which is just a straight drop in as long as you get that right part. How hard is it to change hubs at the track? How good of a mechanic are you? Not necessarily that hard. Car in the air, wheel off, brake off, rotor off, hub off, new hub on. The NA and NB has one large nut that's staked in place. The NC and ND, the hubs are just bolted into place. This is super easy if stuff is not rusted, and a gigantic headache if stuff is rusted into place. So it's up to you and your car, I guess. It's certainly possible. So, but let's proceed with the goal of being proactive and not needing to replace them at the track. That is what I would recommend. Just don't have to worry about it. What's the best option for NC owners seeing track duty and very wide sticky tires? RX8 Hub, Mazda Motorsports, rear hub flange. Those should work well for you. One thing to be aware of with the NC is that because it is, well, kind of because, but point being, the NCs, you can put a lot more rubber on, which is great and can also accelerate the wear of things. So NAs and NBs are kind of, sort of, unless you get crazy, saved by the fact that you can only fit so big of a tire on there. The NC, you can fit a bigger tire on there with a minimal effort, which means that all of your loading, your G-forces, all that kind of stuff goes up quite a bit, which means that your consumables go up, which means that you're more likely to kill a hub. So short version, if you have an NC and you've got really big and sticky tires, if you got 305 tires on there, something bonkers like that, and they're 800 tread wear, there's higher loading because of leverage and whatever else, but your lateral loads are not going to be that much higher because your compound is not super sticky. If you have a full bore race car, your compound is much stickier, your lateral loads are much higher, and your likelihood of wearing things out is also much higher. So hopefully that all makes sense. When in doubt, RX8 hubs, front Mazda Motorsports in the rear, don't worry about it. And that will work totally fine on a street car, but is also not necessary for a street car. But the RX8 hubs are so easy, just drop them on and call it a day. Okay, please show how to check to see if this needs to be done. Again, the stuff that I went through at the beginning, the main thing is that when your tire is in the air, take the top and bottom of the tire. Look, a tire, and rock it like this. If there is play in there, then your bearing is cooked. If there is no play, then your bearing is good. Now, there is a qualifier on that. The tapered roller bearings do have just a tiny amount of play when they are fully torqued down, because things grow just a tiny amount when they get heated up. So on a roller bearing, you'll have just a tiny amount of back and forth. On a ball bearing, you'll have no play back and forth. So that's the easy way there. When should we change hubs? What are the symptoms for failing hubs? Again, what I said at the beginning, so play, which I just went through, rumbling when driving, particularly accelerating or turning, or when the wheel is in the air and you spin it and it kind of rumbles. Excuse me. Oh, here's one that I forgot to mention: pad knockback. So on the front wheels, well, it could be either one actually. If you step on the brakes and everything feels great, and then you go around a corner, and this is generally on track, so high load kind of stuff, and you come up to your next corner, and all of a sudden you have a really long brake pedal, and then you come off of it, and now you have a short brake pedal again, that's pad knockback. That means that your rotor is doing this within the caliper, and it's pushing the pads back out. So then when it recenters, you hit the brakes the first time, and your pads come in, and then you hit the brakes the second time, and your pads actually pinch the rotor. So that is pad knockback. That is another indication of a failing hub. Loose steering, vibration in the steering wheel, and your wheel goes bye-bye. Let's hope we don't get to that point. Is there a good aftermarket replacement for stock/street cars? Make sure it's a good, high-quality one. And name brand by itself doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good hub. Look for the details. Look for the radius here. Make sure that this isn't obscenely thin, that kind of thing. Really short version, buy Mazda hubs. Buy our blueprinted hubs. That way you know you're getting a good wheel that's up for that kind of task, or a good hub rather. Okay, so those are all the questions I had ahead of time. We have no questions. I was very comprehensive, apparently. Okay, so there you go. Now, we are on break next week, so no video next week, but we will be back the following week with another live video as always. If you like this, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things to all the social media channels, Facebook, YouTube, so on and so forth. Happy holidays to everyone, and we will be back next time.